Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. How does this sound out there? Can you hear me with the mask on and everything? Okay, I'm not used to doing this with the mask on, but that's great. Come on down and get a seat, folks. We're going to be starting in just a minute. We only have a couple seats left. And remember, as always, the first 300 people get a new car. Well, thank you all for coming. My name is Chef Warren Caterson, and this is actually the second show I've done since March. Of course, we have been holding these events. I did one last weekend in Port St. Lucie, so next one coming up is in Jacksonville. So I'm glad I'm back on stage, and I'm glad you came out here to the home show to see me. Like I said, my name is Chef Warren. I'm author of Table for Two, the cookbook for couples. It was one of the top 100 cookbooks in America. Over 235 recipes, all scaled down for 2 people. It's just a minimum of leftovers. You can get all the ingredients in a regular supermarket, like Publix, Winn-Dixie, even Walmart. I don't have anything exotic or cute, because if you're like me, I don't like to open a cookbook with a recipe that calls for something like, I don't know, a tablespoon of freeze-dried juniper berries. And you're like, what the heck? You got to drive all over town looking for it. You finally find it in some obscure store up in Ybor City. You come home, you open it up, scoop out what you need, plop it in the pan. What do you do with the rest of the bag? Hey, put a twist tie or knife, put it up in the cupboard till you use it again, which is never, okay? So everything in a regular grocery store, it's all real food, nothing really processed, and you can pretty much make everything in under an hour, most under half an hour. In fact, I've got quite a few you can make in under 10 minutes. I'm going to demonstrate one of those for you here today. Like I said, all these recipes are scaled down for 2, but I wasn't always cooking for 2. Because at one time I had 5 kids at home. So on any given night, I was cooking for at least 7, sometimes 8, 9, or 10, depending on who happened to be dropping by that night. And because I had a reputation as being a pretty good cook, I always had people dropping by. So back when I was cooking for that many people, every single night of the week, I would do a lot of my grocery shopping at places like Sam's Club, BJ's, Costco. And I'd go shopping once a month, and I'd go ahead and stock up on everything, I'd get I'd buy the 50-pound bag of chicken breasts and the 40-pound bag of pork chops. They sell stuff there. 5-gallon drums of spaghetti sauce, toilet paper rolls, 165 rolls to a package. It takes 2 to carry in the house. So I go shopping once a month, and I back the Jeep Cherokee up to the garage and get all the kids out there. They'd bring all those big bags into the kitchen, put them on the countertop. Then I'd get out my hefty Ziploc bag, and I'd break all those big bags down to servings of 7, and I'd label, pork chops, chicken breast, chicken legs, corn, and put them out in the freezer in the garage. In fact, back then, since I was buying so much food just once a month, and Costco was like in the next county, I actually had 2 chest freezers out in my garage. I just kept stock, everything labeled, very organized. In fact, I was so organized, I think you'll enjoy this. I even had a big chalkboard above my freezers, where I had everything in the freezers listed. Then as I used it up, I'd erase it. So next month, when I went way out to Costco, I knew exactly what I had to buy. Very organized, very proud of myself, as I'm sure you are too. But you know what? It didn't make any difference. Because when I'd come home from work and I'd go in the family room where all the kids were laid out watching TV or doing homework, and I'd say, so, what do y'all want for dinner tonight? Not a single time did they ever mention anything I had out in those 2 freezers. I'm serious. I come in and say, so, what do y'all want for dinner tonight? And one of my wise guy kids would say something like, food, or I don't care, make it quick, something good, I gotta go, whatever, those kind of answers. And I tell you what, those of you who have kids or teenagers know what I'm talking about. Well, I tell you what, after a couple months of that nonsense, I had enough. So one Saturday, I had some time in my hands. I went out to the garage, I opened up both freezers, I took out every single bag, and then I ripped the labels off all of them. Yeah. But then I relabeled them with things like food, I don't care, make it quick, something good, I gotta go. That way when I came home from work and I'd go in the family room and I'd say, so, what do y'all want for dinner tonight? And one of my kids would say, I don't care. I'd go right out to the garage, open up the freezer, pull out a big bag of I don't care, and that's what I made for them that night. Yeah, I got them. Of course, they'd all be sitting around the table looking at what I made going, Dad, what's this? Of course, I'd say, I don't care. It's what you all want. It's what you're getting tonight. Like I said, my kids are gone now. I find it really hard to go from cooking for 7, 8, or 9 down to cooking for 2. I find myself buying too much food, throwing too much food out, having way too many leftovers. Heck, my kid's been gone for a couple of years now. But I guarantee you, if you open my freezer today and open it up, in the bottom, you'll find leftovers from the Clinton administration. I just can't seem to get rid of it. I figure there's got to be other people out there like me, which is why I wrote the cookbook, and it seems to be doing so well. But we're just not here to talk about cooking for two. We're actually going to go ahead and create a meal for two. We're going to make a pan-seared tuna. Now, I like to make this recipe for a couple of reasons. The first, this is a recipe, an entree I can make in about 6 to 8 minutes from start to finish with like 4 ingredients. So it's a very quick recipe to make. So it's great on weeknights. It's great if you have company and you don't want to be spending all your time in the kitchen. So it's a very quick meal. The other reason I like to make it, this is a great dish to make for people who don't like seafood, because this is going to taste as close to ribeye steak as anything that doesn't come from a cow, okay? So it doesn't taste like seafood. The other reason I like to make it, it's almost impossible to mess it up. You can cook it perfectly every single time, and I'm going to show you how. Because a lot of us are intimidated cooking seafood. You know, we're so afraid we're going to undercook it. We wind up overcooking it. It comes out dry, the texture of cardboard, no flavor. Either that, or since the last time we overcooked it, we undercook it this time. It comes out mushy, very fishy tasting. No one wants to eat it. But you can cook this perfectly every single time, and I'm going to show you how. Now, the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to heat in my pan over medium-high heat. And then I'm going to start off with about a tablespoon of sesame oil. And I rarely ever cook with sesame oil because it has a very pronounced flavor. But I want the flavor in this dish because it's going to mix with the other ingredients and create a whole new flavor. So that's why I'm using the sesame oil. If I'm just cooking chicken breasts, vegetables, pork chops, then I'll just use regular olive oil, or even better yet, canola oil, which is another healthy oil. I rarely ever cook with extra virgin olive oil, and I don't want you to either, regardless of what some of my celebrity chef colleagues recommend cooking with EVU. The reason I don't recommend cooking with extra virgin olive oil is I want you to save your money. And here's how you save your money. There's all the characteristics that make extra virgin olive oil more expensive because of the wonderful flavor and aroma. It's what they call a first cold press. They don't use any heat or chemicals to extract it, so it's got this wonderful flavor and aroma. Well, as this extra virgin olive oil heats in your pan, all those characteristics dissipate, then eventually disappear. So after a while, your expensive extra virgin olive oil you paid that money for won't taste any different than regular olive oil, canola oil, or vegetable oil. So save this for your salad dressings and go ahead and cook with this or canola oil for other applications. Like I said, I want this flavor to come through. So I'm going to go ahead and add my tablespoon or so of sesame oil. And we'll swirl it around. Now, the only thing I've seasoned my tuna with is just some fresh cracked pepper. We're not using any salt in this dish, and I think if you taste it, you'll see no salt's really going to be needed. So I'm going to add my tuna, and here's how you can cook it perfectly every single time. You notice when my tuna went in, it's kind of that bright pink magenta color. As it starts to cook, you'll see a white line develop where it comes in contact with the pan, and I'll show you that white line in a minute. It's very distinct. When that white line works its way up a quarter of the way up the side of that tuna, not a quarter of an inch, a quarter of the way, it's time for me to turn it over. I turn it over and I stand back and I watch that white line come up a quarter way on the other side. When it reaches that point, my tuna is done to perfection, so it's impossible to mess it up. Whether you're pan sauteing it or grilling it, you watch that white line. Now, how many of you are cooking fish or pork chops or even chicken in a stainless steel skillet like this? I'm not cooking a non-stick skillet, a stainless steel skillet. When you go to turn it over, it seems like half the chicken, pork chop, fish sticks to the bottom of the pan. Everybody got that problem besides me? Well, here's how you can avoid it. There's 3 things I want you to do. The first thing, heat your pan first. So rule number 1 is hot pan. Rule number 2, when your pan's hot, add your oil and swirl it around. So hot pan, cool oil. Rule number 3, immediately add your protein. Hot pan, cool oil, your food will stick a lot less. Now, what a lot of us do, we put the oil in the pan, then we heat it, we heat it, we heat it, we heat it, we heat it. Thinking the longer we heat it, the less our food's going to stick. Actually, the opposite is true. Because the longer the oil heats, the more viscous or sticky it gets. So heat your pan, add your oil and swirl it around. Your oil will heat up almost immediately, then add your protein. Once you add your fish, chicken, pork chop, don't start playing with it. Once it hits that pan, don't touch it. That way it develops a sear on the bottom as well as a thin layer of steam. So when you're ready to turn it over, you'll be able to turn it over just if you're cooking in a non-stick skillet. So hot pan, cool oil, add your protein, don't touch it. Now, if you go to turn it over, like let's say the recipe calls for cooking 3 minutes on a side, and that 3 minutes is up, you go to turn it over, it's sticking a little bit, let it sit for just a little bit longer to develop that sear. Now, I'm going to show you my white line that's come up a quarter of the way. Now, it didn't stick at all at the bottom of the pan. I wish we had a camera, a mirror above us. Okay, you see that white line? Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over and wait for that white line to come up about a quarter way on the other side. Now, what about fish you can't watch cook? So let's say you're cooking mahi-mahi or salmon or cod or swordfish, and you can't watch the white line come up. How do I know when it's done? I use what's known as the Canadian cooking theory. And this was developed by the Canadian Department of Fisheries, 40, 50 years ago. It's almost a foolproof way to cook just about any fish, any way. So whether you're sauteing it, baking it, poaching it, grilling it, regardless of what kind of fish it is, here's their rule. You take your fish out, lay it flat on a plate, then measure it at its thickest point and cook it about 8 to 10 minutes per inch. So it could be 4 or 5 minutes aside, but 8 to 10 minutes per inch total. So if your fish is an inch thick, how long do you cook it? 8 to 10 minutes. If it's half an inch thick, 4 to 5 minutes. Quarter of an inch thick, just 2 or 3 minutes. Almost a foolproof way to cook just about any fish, any way. Now, if I've got fish that's real thick at this end and real thin at this end, kind of like some salmon that you buy, in order to get it cooked evenly to where this end is done before this end dries out, I take that thin end and I tuck it up underneath, so that way it's even all the way through, and I cook it according to the Canadian cooking theory. If it's fish I'm going to turn over, like my tuna here, I take that thin end and I bend it this way and put a toothpick through it, and go ahead and cook it to the Canadian cooking theory. That way I can go in and turn it over. It's almost a foolproof way to cook just about any fish, any way. So now our tuna is just about done here. So I'm going to take it out. Again, it didn't stick at all to the bottom of the pan. And I'm going to add about a tablespoon of soy sauce. This is going to be the only source of salt in the dish, is the soy sauce. But I'm not using it because it has salt in it. I'm using it because soy sauce is rich in natural glutamates. And glutamates are what give us what food scientists now call the fifth taste. Up until about 25 years ago, we recognized 4 tastes: sweet, sour, bitter, salty. Now we recognize a fifth taste receptor on our tongue that food scientists have labeled umami. That's Japanese for deliciousness. It's not a distinct flavor like bitter or salty, it's a savoriness. Foods rich in natural glutamates will wake up those receptors and make all the other flavors in our mouth come alive. So we're using the soy sauce not because it has salt, but because it's rich in natural glutamates, and it's going to help our tuna taste like ribeye steak. Let's stir this around just a little bit. And I'm going to add about 3 tablespoons or so of sherry. It doesn't have to be expensive, but it has to be drinkable. I picked the sherry up here, the Fairbanks at Publix, for about $6. Not expensive, but drinkable. I'm not talking about using cooking sherry or cooking wine. I never recommend using this in the kitchen. Okay, this is the stuff you find with the salad dressings and the olive oils. The reason I don't recommend using cooking wine or cooking sherry is because you can't drink it. Excuse me. So why put something in your food that you can't drink? Not that it's against the law. The reason you can't drink it, this stuff tastes horrible. And the reason it tastes horrible, get this, they load it full of salt. So if you're on a low sodium diet, using cooking sherry or cooking wine defeats the whole purpose. And the reason they put salt in it, it makes it a food product, not an alcohol product. That's why grocery stores that can't sell beer or wine, like when I do shows up north, a lot of the grocery stores can't sell beer or wine, they can still sell cooking wine or cooking sherry, even though there's much alcohol per volume in this as there is in this. Again, why cook with something you can't drink? I mean, you wouldn't come home from work and go, man, what a day. I'd go for a nice glass of wine and pour this and drink it. You'd get sick doing that. And you certainly wouldn't serve it to guests when they came over for the holidays. Hey, everybody's here at Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah. Let's have a bottle of wine and open a bottle of this. You'd be embarrassed out of your socks. Let me take that back. One more comment before I serve the food. I've got some relatives I don't like to see around the holidays. Maybe you do too. So I keep a couple bottles around of this for them. I see the real wine, the real sherry for my friends. You know, there's some relatives I haven't seen at Christmas in like 8 years, okay? So if you've got friends, relatives, you want hanging out, buy this. Otherwise, go ahead and get something inexpensive like this. So if you need white wine to cook with, get out of Trader Joe's, get some 2-buck chuck. Walmart, their Oakley Vineyards for like $2.56. Inexpensive but drinkable. Your food will taste a lot better. I'm going to go ahead and pour this sauce on top of the tuna. I'm going to add just a little bit of water to my pan. This has nothing to do with the recipe. It's going to make it easier for me to clean up after the show. One time I was doing a show up in the Boston World Trade Center up in Boston, and the promoter, we had one of those big kitchen setups, forgot to put water on the stage for us. So the only thing I had was like my can of Sprite. So I poured some Sprite in there just to keep it, from getting caked up. And then during the question and answer session, a woman raised her hand and said, "Chef Warren, I've got a question. Can I use Diet Sprite in that recipe?" And I was like, "I have nothing to do with the recipe, man. I'm just going to make it easier for me to clean up." Now I'm just going to finish this with some chopped parsley. This gives it a nice little bit of color, a little bit of flavor. So sprinkle around the whole plate. Like I said, hold about 11 inches above. You get a nice even distribution. Plus, it looks like the guy's on TV, right? You always want to look good in the kitchen. Because that way, if your meal comes out mediocre and you ask your guest, "So, how was dinner tonight?" And they go, "It was kind of okay." But man, you look good in the kitchen, so always want to look good in the kitchen. Now, I'm going to cut this up and invite you to come down front here, where I've got some toothpicks and some napkins. Make sure you swirl it around in the sauce. And this is one of 235 recipes I've got in my cookbooks, Table for Two, the cookbook for couples, and Table for Two, Back for Seconds, the sequel. I've got them available for here at the show. I'm selling for $20 even, that includes tax. So that's about what you pay at Barnes & Noble or Target, plus I can sign it for you. And I take all major credit cards. I take cash, I take checks. If you have a cute niece, my son's looking, we could talk after the show. And I'll be back on stage at 12, so if you enjoyed this, tell a friend. If you didn't like it, keep your mouth shut. I've got a very fragile ego. Again, I've got the books down here or back at my table. Don't have to get one. I'm here to entertain you. But again, thank you for coming. My name's Chef Warren Caterson. Bon appetit.